Now, how did they procure raw materials? Now, we have evidence of two kind of routes that people use: overland routes, which may be evidenced by toy carts that we found, and riverine or coastal sailing. We have a lot of seals which represent boats and ships with sails, which give us that hint. Now, how materials procured from the subcontinent and beyond? Um, there were perhaps two major ways of doing that. One was establishing settlements. So in Nageshwar and Balakot, for example, settlements was established to procure shell, and not only procure that raw material, but also craftsmen working with shell in these two sites. Then we of course have settlements in Shotughai, perhaps to get their hands on lapis lazuli, which is quite commonly found there. Another strategy would be, sending expeditions. For example, in Khetri in Rajasthan to acquire copper, to South India to acquire gold. Why we say expeditions is because when we look at Khetri and South India, the settlements that we found there, we do not have much Harappan artifacts there. We do have artifacts which are of a quite different nature than that of the Harappan. So we believe that the Harappans were sending expeditions there to set up trade links with the people living in Khetri and in South India. We also have evidence of long distance trade, especially with Oman and Mesopotamia. Much of the copper that we have found in the Harappan civilization has traces of nickel. And we also have some Mesopotamian copper which also has traces of nickel. So perhaps Oman was exporting copper to both Harappa and Mesopotamia. In Oman, we've also found Harappan jars with perhaps which were used for carrying liquids. Now, what liquid we have not yet been able to figure out, but the very existence of Harappan jars in Oman also establishes the fact that the Harappans and the Omanese people were trading with each other. When we look at Mesopotamian texts, we have mentions of Dilmun, which is perhaps Bahrain, Magan, maybe another name for Oman, and Meluha, which we are assuming would be the Harappan area. Now, we've also found Harappan seals in the Mesopotamian region, and many of the Harappan weights and beads have also been found there. Mesopotamian texts also mention the Haya bird. Is the Haya bird the peacock? Well, it's only extrapolated evidence, and we don't know for sure. Coming to seal scripts and weights, very, very important if you are looking at a commercial economy as well. So we have found seals and the impressions of these seals, which are called sealings, on clay bits. Perhaps these clay bits were used to seal the products which were being exported, so that the person who received the products would know, if the seal wasn't broken, that the products have not been tampered with. We also have an enigmatic script of the Harappans because we have not been able to decipher it so far. Some scholars have claimed that they have deciphered, but most other scholars do not agree on this point. But what we do know for sure is that the Harappan script has almost 400 symbols. It was perhaps written from right to left. Now, how we can guess that is when you look at the seals, you see that the spacing between the characters, and the characters are very well formed on the right hand side. But as you move to the left, the writing tends to get very cramped, right? So this has prompted scholars to believe that the script was perhaps written from right to left. Most inscriptions, in fact, all inscriptions are very short, are not like the long inscriptions that we find in Mesopotamia, like you studied in 11th, but very, very short inscriptions. Perhaps this is also a challenge in trying to decipher the Harappan script. Uh, the script we have found on many different surfaces, like on pottery rims, on seals, we found them on tools, on jewelry, in fact, even on bone. So, does that mean that literacy was widespread? Did many more people know how to read and write? Again, when we ask this question, we really don't have any answer to that. Coming to weights, all weights were made of this stone called chert. They were all cubical in structure. They have no markings, but the denominations are binary, the smaller denominations at least. So they go 2, 4, 8, um, I missed a number, should have been 16 and then 32 and 64, right? So it kind of keeps doubling, right up to 12,800 units. The higher denominations follow a decimal system. We've also found metal scale pans, uh, which kind of gives us a hint as to what kind of scales they may have used for measuring weights. What is interesting is that the smaller units may have been used to measure, precious and semi-precious stones, gold and silver, perhaps, and the higher denominations may have been used to measure out, grain or meats and so on, heavier stuff. Ancient authority. What kind of political system did the Harappans have? I mean, did they even have a political system? Now, let's look at the Harappan civilization and try to make a guess. Now, when we look at the civilization, it indicates that a lot of complex decisions were being made. For example, we have a uniformity of Harappan artifacts, for example, which is evident in pottery, in seals, weights, in the measures. Most notably, bricks, right? Even though we know that the bricks were not being produced in any single center, wherever we found Harappan settlements and we've looked at the bricks right from the Jammu region in the north to Gujarat, we see that it was a uniform ratio of 1 is to 2 is to 4, right? Um, whether they were sun-dried bricks or they were baked or fired bricks, all of them. So it seems there was some decision being made on the size of the bricks, right? The settlements were strategically being set up. For example, if you see Nageshwar and Balakot, if you look at Lothal, for example, which is a port town, um, so that is obviously an indication of some complex being decisions being taken by a group of people. We also see that labor was mobilized for making bricks and for constructing massive walls and platforms. And thousands of laborers were being mobilized. So, who was doing that? So, who was organizing all these activities? So, this definitely hints towards the existence of a political system. But what kind of a political system was it? We also have statues, very rare statues of priest kings. So, what was the nature of the king? So, he's called a priest king largely because the early archaeologists who were excavating in this region had been, to Mesopotamia. Their first excavations they had done in Mesopotamia, and we know in the Mesopotamian civilization that the king also acted as a chief priest, right? So, these early archaeologists named them the chief priest, and we still, priest king. We still continue to use this nomenclature because of a lack of a better word. We also have the citadel structures like the Great Bath or a structure named as the palace. So perhaps it does indicate that some people were definitely more powerful than the others. Which brings us to the nature of state. So was it a hereditary monarchy? Was there only one person ruling over the entire civilization? Or was it an oligarchy, a group of people ruling the entire empire? Was it a centralized empire? Was it decentralized? Or were there a confederacy of city states? So these are difficult questions to ask, especially when we look at the high level of standardization right across the civilization. We might assume there was a single set of rulers, who was ruling over the entire extent of the Harappan civilization. But given the primitive means of transport and communication, this were they really able to extend equal levels of control right across the empire? So these are difficult questions to ask, or rather to answer. Questions, of course, we must keep asking.